It's that time again. You're about to receive your daily dose of audio vomit. We are going to talk about the things that go bump in the night and the things that you might see in the sky. We will even talk about Bigfoot and other stupid bullshit that will make your day fucking awesome. So grab your favorite drink, kick back, and turn up the volume. It's time for the Rick Itzari Show with your host, Rick Itzari.
Good day, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. It's been a week, I would say. It's been pretty crazy. We've got several things happening on in the world. We had some storms that go across the country and do some damage throughout there, and I hope everyone's safe on that. I haven't really done a lot of email searching or doing some news reports about any sightings or any kind of stories, but I might be recording later on today to read out some of those emails to actually talk to a few other people to get their stories out. So I know that the JFK files are just been released this week. I have no idea what's in them. I wouldn't mind to see what's in them. It's something to talk about though, but I don't think it would be anything that we don't know already, but I'm sure there'll be some stuff there. The president said he's not going to redact anything like that, but who knows? We'll see. We'll see what happens and see how this is. But today I have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Phillips Stevens out of University of Buffalo. I want to bring him up to right now. Here he is.
Here I am.
Yes, Dr. Stevens, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to actually talk to us on the podcast. And was digging up, and just searching around about the subject of vampires, and that's what today's subject is vampires. And so I saw that you had a specialty in that. Um, let's talk about a little bit about your bio first, about where you come from. You've retired in 2019. Congratulations on that. From the anthropology department at University of Buffalo. You've had several degrees. You got one in English from Yale, a PhD from Northwestern University, and you also did some time in the Peace Corps. And how was your experience in the Peace Corps? How'd you like that?
That was life changing. I went to Nigeria to teach English, and the experience really got me into anthropology. The Peace Corps changed the course of my life completely.
Do you suggest a Peace Corps to people that's looking for direction?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was really dismayed when I heard about what was happening to USAID, and I returned Peace Corps volunteers like myself are concerned about the future of the Peace Corps as well. We certainly hope it doesn't get the axe because it's what it does is life changing for not only the volunteers themselves but for their recipients of their efforts overseas. And it's a very inexpensive program, and its results are just incalculable, really. It's been going, as you know, probably since 1960, and very successfully, and it's still continuing. Uh,
It
it it had to shut down during the pandemic, but it restarted, and we're underway again.
And that is, it's just, I've heard so many people talk about it. There's where I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I have talked to people before that's been in the Peace Corps, and as you know, Asheville is kind of I would say, a modern hippie town in a way. It's quite it's got everything that you would want here in people. It's got a huge diversity of people here. Um, it's see, but when you were into that and you got into anthropology, you specialized in African studies and in Caribbean studies. Is that correct?
Yeah, those are my geographic areas of concentration, but my theoretical areas were religion and supernatural belief, cultural change, and a variety of related issues in cultural anthropology.
Okay. Now you have a book out, and also it's called "Rethinking the Anthropology of Magic and Witchcraft." Is that you get
Yep, yep. I have a copy of it right here. It's
okay?
published by Routledge, an old venerable academic publisher,
Hmm.
and the date is 2024. It was published last year.
Okay. Now, how long did it take you to do that research for the book and to write it out and get it published and everything?
Tell you the truth, my interest in this area, magic and witchcraft, began when I was in the Peace Corps, which was the middle 1960s. And at the University of Buffalo, I developed a course on the anthropology of magic, sorcery, and witchcraft, which I taught continually for every single year I was there, a couple of times, twice a year. It was extremely popular. And the idea for the book developed over time. Um, from the 1980s, I had a pretty complete idea of what I wanted to do, but it was surprisingly complex, and I couldn't do it until I retired. When I retired and COVID set in, forcing isolation, that was really the ideal conditions to get this work done. And it went to the publishers in 2023 and was released the end of that year. It is the result of, I should say, a professional lifetime. It's hard to say how many years, but I tell the story of my first experience with sorcery in the book, and that was in a secondary school in Nigeria in 1964.
Oh, wow.
So it goes back that far.
Now, tonight's subject, or the reason why I contacted you about that is, also like witchcraft and sorcery, but also talk about vampires. What can you
Right.
tell me on the subject of vampires?
Yeah. So I am reluctant to be classified as an expert on vampires. For me, vampires is a sideline of my interests in witchcraft. Witches, the classic flying, transforming, child-stealing witch of the Inquisition of Europe. One of the attributes of this terrible imaginary creature is vampirism. And in that way, it manifests a belief that is probably universal and among all people, that there are dangerous creatures out there who are interested in human blood or the human life force. They attack people at night and suck out their life force. And of course, in most cultures, the life force is symbolized by blood. So vampirism is an attribute of this terrible creature, the witch. So that's how I got interested in vampires. And it seems to me that this is a extremely widespread belief. I'm not certain it's absolutely universal, but it's extremely widespread and it's quite ancient. There are references in the Bible and the book of Proverbs to a monstrous leech type creature called Aluka that sucks out the life force of people. There are references in ancient myths, Gilgamesh and others going way back into the fourth or fifth millennia, before the Common Era. So this is to me one of a number of deep-seated fundamental fears that are inherent in people. And that's what my book focuses on. The subtitle is Inherently Human.
Oh. Now, have you witnessed any vampires personally yourself?
No, no. Again, this is an imaginary creature.
Right.
And you and I were chatting about Africa earlier.
Mhm.
In When I went to my little culture where I did my doctoral research in northeastern Nigeria, the language that the people speak was unrecorded, so I had to get along. And English-speaking people were referring to the cannibals. And I knew that there was no cannibalism here. None had ever been recorded. What were they talking about? And indeed, that was the most appropriate English word they had for witches. A similar thing happened to an anthropologist in East Africa who heard about vampires being discussed. What's this? Vampires? What are you talking about? This is not Transylvania. This is not Romania. And again, that was the best English word that people had for this dominant attribute of their concept of the witch. Um, and so it is an attribute of a kind of a imaginary monster that is created by the human evolutionary imagination over the course of our species, I dare say. One of many, and my book discusses 14 attributes of the witch,
Mhm.
including subversion. The witches are the original conspirators, including flying. Witches fly. Witches transform themselves into any other form or to become invisible. Witches steal children. This is universal, where there are witches, and so on. And they are bloodthirsty and cannibalistic, and they kill, and lots of terrible, terrible things. And witches are sexual as well. They interfere with human sexuality, and at their gatherings, at their meetings, they engage in whatever the culture considers to be aberrant sexual behavior. Witches everywhere, for example, engage in incest, which is taboo in all cultures in the world. There's no exception to that statement. So, vampirism is just one of these fundamental human fears, kind of the stuff of nightmares that people have. That there is some force out there, whether it's in human form or some nocturnal monster that delights in human blood. It's just one of those fundamental fears that we all have.
Now, has have people ever contacted you about what to do because they do believe in the vampires and you're like
Yes,
reinforcing them?
yes. And this was a surprising aspect of my career. And there are people today who believe that many of these old myths derive out of actual factual instances, and that there is a real human belief, human practice of vampirism. And there are explanations for it, that some people have a deficiency of heme, Heme, the red blood carrying component, red blood cells carrying component of the blood, and their deficiency in heme makes them bloodthirsty. There is no evidence for this. There is a genetic disease which afflicts northern peoples, mostly Scandinavian and northern European peoples, called porphyria. Porphyria causes terrible changes in the skin and the hairiness of the body and a number of physical attributes. And this has been proposed as a origin of beliefs in vampires and werewolves, that people with this disease were kept inside because they're so hideous to look at, and they were let out at night and they were seen in the light of the moon and so forth. Again, this is all supposition. Problem with that explanation, a problem, is geographic. These beliefs are universal. Porphyria affects only these people from northern Europe. There was an outbreak of such beliefs in South Africa, which you might know, brought there by the Boers and the Afrikaners in the 18th century and later. But otherwise, it's a very localized belief. So the fact is, it's all false. There is no such syndrome among living peoples, but it is a powerful element of our imagination.
With Hollywood, promotes the vampirism and the monsters and everything. Do you believe that they kind of fuel the fire to believe in this stuff, to actually?
Sure. The word comes from an old Romanian word for a vengeful, blood-sucking ghost. And that was the traditional vampire, for several centuries, up into the 18th and 19th century, when it became a literary creature. And there were probably traditional beliefs in named creatures like this in most, if not all, cultures around the world. But it gets kind of complex. We should probably start with Bram Stoker and look at all the influences on him, which is really a century or a century and a half of earlier writings on the vampire or the vampire. And the name Dracula, coming from an old 15th century Romanian leader, Prince Vlad, who was called Dracula because his father was Dracul, a knight of the dragon, Dracul in that language, Dracula meaning son of Dracul. And Vlad was a warrior, and he developed a very effective method of defense against the invading Ottoman Turks. He impaled his prisoners of war alive on the ramparts of the city of Bucharest, and he got the nickname of Vlad the Impaler. His reputation spread across Europe, and it exaggerated and elaborated, and he became a bloodthirsty creature, and he became, according to some literary analysts, he was the model or a model for Bram Stoker. And from that time, from that century of the, I think it was the 18th and 19th centuries, the modern vampire really developed. And here we have this transforming creature who sleeps all day and is active at night and requires human blood. And then there's the issue of immortality and the issue of infection. if the vampire bites you, you become one. I don't know where that came from. I'm pretty sure it was established in vampire lore by the time of Stoker. And then into the 20th and 21st centuries, it becomes, as you mentioned, a Hollywood element. One thing I've asked my students to think about is, why is this creature so appealing? Modern vampires from Anne Rice to the Twilight series and the True Blood series, they're well-to-do, well-educated, good-looking, young people, and they have this terrible affliction which they can't control. Why is this an appealing element? And I haven't got a satisfactory answer, but there's something very sensual about this creature. And the idea that the vampire attacks you in the neck, right into the jugular, and that's a very intimate gesture, isn't it? So surely sexuality has something to do with all of this. And beyond that, Rick, I can't go very far. I'm sorry to say.
It's okay. When you were doing your research for your book, did you go out into the field and actually try to do extra research to talk to people what they think about vampires? Or
no, I must. As I said, vampirism was just one of the 14 attributes of the classical witch that I was interested in, and I got all my data from the literature.
Oh, okay.
There were fears of this kind of creature in the areas where I did research in West Africa. So some of it is based on firsthand information, but I did not conduct interviews with that focus. No.
Now, in certain religions, there's like voodoo and that participate in type of witchcraft such as voodoo like that. And have you ever witnessed or came across any of that stuff?
Yeah, and that gets us there. I do mention voodoo, Vodun, the Haitian folk religion, in my book. There is a phenomenon which I think needs more exploration. When a group of people becomes extremely exclusive, so that there are barriers between them and outsiders. And if these barriers continue for some time, stories develop about that group of people. This is a universal phenomenon. And stories about what terrible things those people are doing. Why are they hiding from us? Why are they covering up their activities? Such stories develop about nuns in convents and monks in monasteries. And the same thing happened with Haiti during the 18th century as a result of the Code Noir, the Black Code of King Louis XIV, the Sun King, the enlightened king, the builder of Versailles. He imposed really, really restrictive laws on Haiti, one of his Caribbean possessions. And Haitian, the slaves in Haiti were under penalty of severe penalty, 3 strikes kind of thing, were forbidden from engaging in any religious practice except French Catholicism, absolutely nothing else. There was also a strong element of anti-Semitism in Louis' dictates about the conduct of people in Haiti. No Judaism was allowed, and so the folk religion of Haiti, Vodun, which has African roots and it blended with Christian elements, went underground. It did not die out. It was not suppressed. It went into hiding, and people went to church on Sundays, but they practiced voodoo in their homes on other days of the week in private. But outsiders developed the modern image of voodoo, which involves vampirism, cannibalism, child sacrifice, all kinds of illicit sexuality, and you name it. A lot of negative elements that became attached to voodoo. When the Louisiana Purchase opened up the port of New Orleans to the transfer of slaves in 1804 or whenever it was, the idea of voodoo was already developed. And Haitian people coming from Haiti were not shunned, but were suspect already because they were believed to be practitioners of all these terrible things. And this happens, and cannibalism and vampirism are among these terrible attributes that are assigned to people who have been excluded or have been exclusive, I should say, for a long time. The same thing happened to groups in America. One of the best examples is the Bohemian Grove, that retreat center near San Francisco, where politicians assembled over time, and there were all kinds of stories about how they sacrificed babies and had illicit sexual orgies and so on. You can look it up, Bohemian Grove.
Yes.
Google that.
And I believe, that was mostly for the high up, the wealthy, presidential.
That's right.
Yeah, it was like anybody that was famous or high up on the scale of wealth, you were definitely
And I don't want to
invited.
get us too far afield, but this is
No.
the stuff of conspiracy theories,
Yes.
which I also argue is fundamentally human. People everywhere imagine that there are people outside who want to do us harm. And in times of social anxiety, rapid social change, or economic stress, or political stress, geographic stress, people start to believe these things which were marginal during comfortable times. And this is how these stories develop. Look at the elements in QAnon, for example, which is one of the most recent cult ideas and conspiracy ideas that people have constructed. And you'll find child sexual molestation, child sex trafficking, cannibalism, and vampirism are among the beliefs of what people in the so-called deep state engage in, right? These are persistent elements that appear at critical times in history, universally.
Now, we're also talking about other conspiracy theories. They just released the JFK files this week. I don't know if it's going to be redacted or anything like that, but what do you think about that? What's your opinions about that?
Well, I really don't have basis for any opinion, but I tend to trust rigid science-based examinations of issues. I am a scientist, and when the first conspiracies developed after what was his name, Oswald and Jack Ruby,
Yeah.
and the Warren Commission, I tended to believe it. They did a very careful job. I had no reason to distrust And I tend to go with the majority of critics today, saying there may be some details that have never been revealed, but they're probably not very important.
Yeah.
And I think there are not going to be any blockbuster revelations in all of these documents. I feel kind of pity for the people who have to go through them. They said between 60 and 80,000 pages,
Yes.
and some of those pages are barely legible. So
The job of that, of having to go through that, is just
really,
tedious work there. I've been listening to it. I really don't think there's too much that we're going to find out. I've been hearing these stories over the years. There's always conspiracy about the lady with the cover on her head, and there was a third shooter or something like that. It's just, and that goes back to, any kind of conspiracy theory. There's always something else that goes along with something else, and
that's right.
such as like Bigfoot. The stories of Bigfoot, and
I did a little investigation of Bigfoot also many years ago.
you want to talk about that? Yeah.
I could send you that material if you like. I wrote an article. I don't even remember what year it was. Bigfoot is just one manifestation of a extremely widespread belief, which seems to be, again, fundamentally human. It's the stuff of world folklore, indeed, especially children's stories. The idea that out there in nature, in fundamental sin-free, worry-free nature, where people live as God intended them to be, there are people like us who are happy doing living the way they live, but when their territory is encroached upon, they get angry like people do everywhere, and they react. And it makes a lot more sense if we imagine that they are people like us, maybe bigger than us, hairier than us, stronger than us, but like us. And they are kind of a sympathetic concept, right? And this kind of belief is really widespread around the world. And Sasquatch and Yeti and the other manifestations of this belief that we know well are just a few examples of such widespread beliefs.
When I was in South Africa, a few times I heard and I have read some stories about the Tukalush.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and so I have asked a few people that, around it, and my friends, and were like, "Oh, it's just a bedtime story trying to get your kids to go to bed, and if they don't go to bed, the Tukalush might come and get them." But now in certain Africans, that I talk to, South Africans, you mentioned the word Tukalush to them, and they's like, no, don't talk. Don't talk. It's
Right.
disrespectful. You don't talk about it. And
Right.
that got me even more curious. The culture between the whites and the black, right there in South Africa, how their religions and how their beliefs are different. And, for them, for one side, they're just, oh, that's just a fairy tale belief. But it shocks me how much, the other side, we're like, no, you don't talk about that's kind of like a tube, like you just don't talk about that kind of stuff. It's taboo.
What you're doing, Rick, is you're opening up a whole nother conversation here.
Yeah.
There are some universal human traits here. One thing is the idea that talking about something might bring that thing into your presence. make it into a reality. This is again, a universal belief. It has to do with the power of words. It has to do with human cognition. Um, um, and the idea of don't talk about that is a very widespread belief around the world. The Tokolosh or Tokoloshi or Tokalushi, with their varying pronunciations of the name through different Southern African cultures, has a variety of different manifestations. One of the attributes of the witch is that it has a familiar. That's the middle or early English word for the witch's pet or the witch's companion, which shares some of the witch's power and can go out in the witch in place of the witch. And in parts of Southern Africa, the Tokoloshi is a witch's companion. In other places, or maybe in the same places, it's primarily a sexual thing. And this little creature is imagined as a dwarf, shorter than your bed, right? To protect you from the tokolosh, you put your bed up on supports, like if the bed has legs on it, you put the legs on stones to elevate it so that the tokolosh can't reach you. Um, he is hypersexual. He's always male, and he has huge genitals, which he slings over his shoulders. There's all these stories about the sexuality of the Tokolosh. In other places, he's really, really dangerous, and he's very sensitive to human activity. So if you talk about him, you talk in whispers. And make your conversation as short as possible so that the Tokolosh doesn't hear you. It's a fascinating belief system, and it extends over a wide area. I don't know what else to say. I haven't heard other attributes. I don't know if the Tokolosh is a cannibal or vampire. I haven't heard those attributes, but he's definitely sexual and he's malicious in most cases.
I have heard that, also if you leave out offerings, if you're having troubles with the Tukalish, you leave out offerings such as candy, um, sometimes seeds, like not like seeds, but like nuts, like like peanuts or anything like that. It would also, make a peace with the Tukalish, and so it'll leave you alone. I
Sure,
they they told
I
me
think
stuff like
so
that.
too. Yes. Leave little treats out on the
Mhm.
edge of your compound, and so it knows that you have acknowledged it, and it will leave you alone. It won't come inside. And that's another widespread belief that goes back to the early Halloween celebrations in ancient Ireland and Scotland, right? The early Celtic beliefs and this seems to be the origin of the trick or treat element
Yes.
in Halloween. We're getting into worldwide ethnology
Yes.
here, Rick.
But it's interesting. I love talking about this stuff. I find it very, very interesting. I have not got a chance to get your book yet. I just, but I would love to get it and read it sometime. And it's just, also when you think about this kind of stuff, it is taboo across the country. A lot of people, like here in cultures in America, they refuse to trick or treat, to celebrate Halloween, and they also, I've seen people put up a special like prayers above their door frames to keep the evil element out of their house.
Yeah, sure.
That have you run
That's
across that
widespread
before?
too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Um, and throughout Africa, children are considered extremely vulnerable and attractive to spirits who want human companions or human meals.
Mhm.
And children are from infancy up to the level of toddler, and even later are wrapped with magical items to protect them against dangerous spirits, and amulets and devices that are believed to have magical power to keep danger at bay. And there's the old Judaic, what's it called, the mezuzah on the side of your house.
Mhm.
The belief in the evil eye throughout Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean fringe. People put up little mirrors on their doors to reflect back any evil influence that might come from a visitor or a stranger who has the evil eye. So these are different manifestations off the top of my head from the same
Right.
kind of thing you're referring to. Everywhere, the house is protected. The house, the residence where people live, is it's peaceful, it's orderly, it's clean, not only in the sense of dirt, but in the sense of dangerous thinking, as well as dangerous spirits. Um, in the American South, in the early days of slavery, when literacy was very rare, people uh, prized literacy so much that they presumed that spirits could be occupied by putting pages from telephone books onto the outsides of their walls, or pages from newspapers with lots and lots and lots of print on the outside of the wall. So any wandering spirits or any spirits who might be curious about what's inside the house would be distracted, because they are so interested in literacy, as
Mhm.
people are, that they would stop and read whatever people put up on the walls to defend them. Um, oh my goodness, I could go on and on about
Yeah. Now,
these kinds of protections.
mhm. Yeah, I because you could there's different protections like such as sage, lighting sage and going to the
That's right.
corners of your house.
Getting
I
back to vampires, there's the
Yeah,
belief in garlic,
yes, holy water.
holy water. Good
Yeah,
one.
is the wooden stake to the heart, to help kill and protect, and
And the
also
wooden stake to the heart was also used in areas where um, zombie beliefs, as in Haiti, where the zombie developed, and any uh, person who died with a grudge, um, people might fear that the ghost of that person would come back and seek revenge. They might put the body face down with a stake driven through it to hold it down. And this was common in Transylvania and other areas. And vampirism spread into New England, and you might be surprised to know that vampirism outlasted witchcraft beliefs in New England by almost a full century.
Mhm.
The last witches were persecuted in New England at the end of the 17th century, but beliefs in vampires, the vengeful ghost of a person who considers himself or herself to have been wronged in life, and might come back and attack the living while they were sleeping. That kind of belief lasted in New England for another whole century, until the end of the 19th century. We in Rhode Island and Connecticut, especially into the 1890s, there were beliefs in vampires.
Now, I have seen different grave sites to where the graves were caged in by metal cages to keep the body to coming back to life from either a zombie or vampire. Have you witnessed anything like that before?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. I
Down
could
in
refer.
Alabama, I've been to a couple of cemeteries where they have cages. over a few grave sites, and I asked around about that, and they said, well, so the body won't reanimate to come back.
Okay, okay. One of the things that witches do that I didn't mention is they spread disease, especially epidemics type diseases whose causes are poorly understood. Like HIV/AIDS in Africa in the 1980s and 1990s when it underwent its great spread. The first job of AIDS workers was to assure people that this is not spread by witchcraft. And vampires do the same thing. One of the most common explanations for tuberculosis, the wasting disease called consumption. Why was it called consumption? Because the body is being consumed over time. And in traditional areas, a common belief was that vampires were attacking that person and sucking out their life force over time. And the person was gradually becoming weaker and thinner, and and wherever there's tuberculosis in traditional areas, you're likely to find suspicions of this kind of human cause.
Wow. I mean, everything you've talked about today, I mean, it makes sense. Everything that people think of that this could actually happen, even though it's just all belief, it's just all imaginary in certain ways. But I mean, there's people that really truly believe this stuff, that it actually is, a vampire out there, or there's actually night walkers or anything like that. Now, with that being,
Can I interrupt
yeah, go ahead.
one more point?
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
one of the values of anthropology is that we understand that these beliefs should not be condemned. They should not be regarded as signs of ignorance or stupidity, because they are so widespread around the world. These are this word will be surprising to you. These are logical beliefs. It's logical that people think this way, and and we're not going to change beliefs by saying that that's just not true. That's just not true. We need to change cultural systems. These beliefs are integrated with other beliefs and other assumptions about the way the world works. And change is gradual, and it must be systemic. If you're following me.
Yes, I do.
So
Uh,
I had some experiences with people who believed they were victims of hex, of sorcery, and one woman who believed she was a victim of the evil eye. Way back in the 1980s, I wrote about these. I did some witch doctoring um, to try to persuade the people that either the hexes were too weak, or they were too old and they had worn off, or that they could be countered, or they had been countered by other stronger beliefs, and that they should really listen to their doctors or their psychologists, because saying that's just false doesn't do it. You can't change a fundamental systemic belief like this by just saying it's not true. You got to work within the belief system and change gradually the whole, or at least a lot of the whole system.
Now, is there any other books that you've published out before?
Not
That-
on this topic. I
not-
was editor of a Routledge Anthropology of Religion series in 2011, a 4-volume work on the anthropology of religion. And that was published by Routledge as well. But I have no other books on this topic.
Okay. Now, can you give us any more information, a website, or your email address, or anything that we can get a hold of you, that the
Absolutely.
listeners can listen to you and maybe have some questions to follow up on, or anything like that?
My email address is easiest, pstevens, Pstevens, at buffalo.edu. And there it is
Mhm.
on the screen. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
And
no problem.
I'll be glad to respond to any questions.
Wow. Dr. Phillips Stevens, I really do appreciate your time today. You taking this time out. I know it's kind of off the wall to contact you about this, but I was just really curious after I was reading a little bit about you, on the internet, and I find the whole magic, sorcery, and witchcraft and vampires just very, very interesting. And sometimes I just can't get enough of it. And I could probably sit here all day and listen to you, talk about the subject and just share information between each other. I
Yeah, yeah, it's been good. It's been fun, and thank you for allowing me the time because some of these topics are complex and
Yes.
they can't be answered briefly.
No, they can't. So if you do you have anything else that you would like to say or anything you'd like to promote or anything like that?
My book is designed as a textbook, but it was also designed to be readable by any intelligent person. You don't need to know anthropology, for example. Everything you need to know is explained in the book itself. So uh, I hope it gets wider. Routledge, like a number of publishers, are not doing the active marketing that they used to do.
Mhm.
And the authors of books are burdened with more marketing than they had been used to before. And so it's word of mouth and the help of programs like this that we get it out. So I hope more people will have a look at it. I think I have revealed an aspect of these universal beliefs that have not been studied before, have not been explained in this way before. I think that I've got something new here, and it's valuable. It's fundamentally human. It's studying these topics is a way to know more about ourselves, the way we think, and the way we act in stressful situations.
Now, that was one of the most popular courses there at UB, was your class there.
Right,
And
right. It was.
and now, like, how many students would you have at one time taking a class? Were they trying to fight to get into your classroom or what?
It varied. I had as many as 200 or more than 200. The average was about 100, 150. And it couldn't really comfortably be larger than that because I needed assistance and providing me with teaching assistants to help me grade papers, for example, was always a problem. Um, but it was always over 100 per semester.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's so cool. Like I said, Dr. Philip Stevens, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on to my podcast, and I would love to have you back on sometime. Whenever you got some free time and talk about other subjects.
I'm retired, Rick, so I've got a lot more free time than I used
All
to
right, all right.
have.
Well,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome. You have a good day.
Thanks. So
All right. So, right now, uh, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really do appreciate that, Dr. Philip Stevens. I very lucky that I have him on to the podcast today, and I don't know what to say. His information really, really it gives you a different aspect about vampires and about how people think about these. Sometimes it's just people think about it too much and they get overwhelmed by it, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by things that's going on in the world, and I get that. I get overwhelmed. We all get overwhelmed, but go into a podcast, listen about UFOs, Bigfoot, vampires. any other conspiracy stuff, I know it can be overwhelming at times. But that little short time helps me escape the reality of what's going on in the world. And I love talking about these subjects. And I hopefully we can get more guests on to the show. This is the email address again. I'm not the email address, but the website that where you can get Dr. Phillips Stevens booked from at Routledge.com. And God, it's Rethinking the Anthropology of Magic and Witchcraft, which, you know, I haven't got the book. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my to get list, and the last book I just read, let's see, what was it here? Oh yeah, The Interpreted Journey by John G. Fuller. That was really good. And but I suggest you go out, visit the website of Routledge.com, get Dr. Phillips Stevens' book, and Rethinking the Anthropology of Magic and Witchcraft. Like I said, I really do appreciate everyone out there listening, and I hope that we can get together again soon with the doctor and talk about some more subjects. So this is it for today's show. Tonight I get them mixed up a little bit. Day and night, it's all the same to me, really. I work a lot. So this is the end of today's podcast, and I really do appreciate you guys listening. So, as you know, really the difference between you and me is just a couple of drinks.
You have been listening to The Rick Itzari Show. Tune in again for more crazy stuff that will make you wonder, what the hell did I just listen to? If you would like to follow The Rick Itzari Show on social media, search for the show on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you would like to be on the show to tell about an encounter you may have had, you should email Rick at therickitsaryshow@gmail.com. And remember, the difference between you and me is just a couple of drinks, a tinfoil hat, and one crazy night in Asheville.